Most people are taught the same financial formula: study hard, get a good job, work for money. But what if that advice is exactly what keeps many people financially stuck? In 1997, a book challenged everything millions of people believed about money. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. A simple story about two fathers with completely different views on wealth, success, and financial freedom. One believed in job security. The other believed in building assets. And the lessons inside this book would go on to influence millions of people around the world. In this episode, you'll discover the key ideas behind Rich Dad, Poor Dad, why the book became so popular, what it teaches about money, and whether its lessons still apply today. My name is Clara, and welcome back to Native Flow. Let's begin with lesson number 1, the two fathers who taught completely different financial lessons. Lesson number 1, the two fathers who taught completely different financial lessons. At the heart of Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a very simple idea. Two fathers, two mindsets, two completely different views about money. And according to the author, those two perspectives shaped his entire financial future. Now here's something important. The book's title can be misleading. The Poor Dad was not actually poor. In fact, he was highly educated. He worked hard, earned degrees, believed in academic success, and followed the traditional path that many people are taught to follow. Study hard, get good grades, find a secure job, work hard, save money, and everything will eventually work out. Honestly, this is the advice millions of people still receive today. Now let's look at the Rich Dad. Unlike the Poor Dad, the Rich Dad was not highly educated in the traditional sense, but he understood money, business, investing, assets, and financial freedom. While the Poor Dad focused on earning money through a job, the Rich Dad focused on building systems that could generate money without requiring constant work. And honestly, this difference became the foundation of the entire book. Now imagine a child receiving financial advice from two respected adults. One says, "Go to school and find a safe job." The other says, "Learn how money works and make money work for you." Which advice should you follow? That question fascinated Robert Kiyosaki because both men were intelligent, both cared about their families, both wanted success, yet they viewed money completely differently. Now here's the lesson that changed everything. The Poor Dad often said, "I can't afford it." The Rich Dad encouraged a different question. How can I afford it? At first, this seems like a small difference, just a few words, but psychologically, it's enormous. "I can't afford it" ends the conversation. The brain stops searching. The problem feels closed, but "how can I afford it" forces the brain to think, to look for solutions, to become creative. And honestly, this mindset shift appears throughout the entire book. Now let's talk about another important difference. The Poor Dad valued security. The Rich Dad valued opportunity. The Poor Dad worried about losing money. The Rich Dad focused on creating money. The Poor Dad believed working hard for money was the answer. The Rich Dad believed learning how money works was the answer. Again, neither perspective was completely irrational, but the author argues that one perspective creates financial dependence, while the other creates financial freedom. Now here's something fascinating. The book is not really about money, not entirely. It's about thinking. Because before people change their finances, they often need to change their beliefs, their habits, their assumptions, their mindset. And honestly, That's why the book became so influential. People weren't simply learning financial information, they were being challenged to think differently. Now let's talk about education. One of the book's most famous arguments is that schools teach academic subjects, but rarely teach financial literacy. Students learn mathematics, history, science, languages, but many graduate without understanding investing, taxes, assets, cash flow, or financial independence. And honestly, this idea resonated with millions of readers. Whether people agreed with the author or not, it started important conversations. Now, here's the biggest lesson from this section. The book presents two different paths. One path focuses on working for money, the other focuses on learning how money works. And according to Robert Kiyosaki, the choice between those paths often determines a person's financial future. Now, before we finish this lesson, I want you to remember something important. The rich dad and the poor dad represent more than two people. They represent two ways of thinking, two ways of seeing opportunities, and two different relationships with money. And in the next lesson, we'll discover the most famous idea in the entire book. Why the rich buy assets while everyone else buys liabilities. Lesson number 2, assets versus liabilities, the idea that made the book famous. If there is one lesson that made Rich Dad, Poor Dad famous around the world, it's this one, assets versus liabilities. And honestly, this idea is the heart of the entire book. Robert Kiyosaki argues that the difference between wealthy people and everyone else is not necessarily income. It's not education. It's not intelligence. It's not luck. It's what they buy. Now, at first, that sounds too simple, but let's explore it. According to the book, an asset puts money into your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. That's it. A surprisingly simple definition. And honestly, this simplicity is one reason the concept became so popular. Now imagine two people earning exactly the same salary. Both earn $3,000 per month. The first person spends most of that money on things that continuously cost money. The second person spends part of that money buying things that generate income. Over time, their financial situations begin moving in completely different directions. Why? Because of assets and liabilities. Now let's look at examples. According to the book, assets might include businesses, investments, stocks, rental properties, royalties, or anything that generates cash flow. These assets continue producing income even when you're not actively working. And honestly, that's why the rich dad loved them, because every asset creates another stream of income. Now, let's look at liabilities, car payments, consumer debt, expensive purchases that constantly require money, luxury items bought before financial stability. According to Kiyosaki, many people spend years accumulating liabilities while believing they are becoming wealthier. But in reality, they are increasing their expenses. Now, here's where the book became controversial. The author argues that many people think their house is an asset, but he challenges this idea. Why? Because if a house continuously costs money through maintenance, taxes, insurance, and mortgage payments, it may not produce income. And according to his definition, that makes it behave more like a liability. Now, honestly, many financial experts disagree with parts of this argument, and that's important to acknowledge. But whether readers agree or disagree, the discussion forces people to think differently about money. And that's exactly what made the book so influential. Now, here's a fascinating psychological lesson. Most people buy things to look wealthy. The rich dad focused on becoming wealthy first. Think about that. Many people purchase expensive cars, luxury clothing, and status symbols, not because they can truly afford them, but because they want to appear successful. The rich dad taught the opposite approach. Build assets first, build income streams first, create financial stability first, then enjoy luxuries later. And honestly, this lesson resonates strongly with many readers. Now imagine two friends. One buys an expensive car immediately after receiving a salary increase. The other uses that same extra income to invest in a business or an income-producing asset. At first, the first friend appears richer. The car is visible. People notice it. The second friend's investment is invisible. Nobody sees it. But 10 years later, the outcome may be very different because appearances and wealth are not always the same thing. Now, here's another key idea. The rich dad believed that wealthy people focus on acquiring assets continuously, month after month, year after year, while many others focus on increasing expenses as their income grows. This is often called lifestyle inflation. The more money people earn, the more they spend. And honestly, many people become trapped in this cycle for decades. Now let's talk about financial freedom. According to the book, financial freedom happens when income from assets becomes large enough to cover living expenses. At that point, work becomes a choice rather than a necessity. Whether or not someone fully agrees with this definition, it presents a powerful goal. Building systems that support your life rather than depending entirely on your labor. Now, before we finish this lesson, I want you to remember something important. The most valuable part of the asset versus liability lesson is not the definitions themselves. It's the habit of asking, is this purchase making me richer or poorer? That simple question can completely change financial decisions. And in the next lesson, we'll explore another famous idea from the book, why the rich don't work for money, they make money work for them. Lesson number 3, why the rich don't work for money. Now let's explore one of the most famous and controversial ideas in the entire book. The rich dad often said, the poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. At first, this sounds impossible because almost everyone works for money. People have jobs, businesses, careers, responsibilities. So what exactly did he mean? The answer lies in the way wealthy people think about income. Most people earn money by exchanging time for it. They work an hour, they get paid, they work another hour, they get paid again. This system works, but it has one major limitation. There are only 24 hours in a day. And honestly, this means your income often has a ceiling. Now imagine a person stops working. What happens to their income? For many people, it stops too, because their money depends entirely on their labor. Now compare that with someone who owns a business, investments, rental properties, or other income-producing assets. Even while sleeping, those assets may continue generating income. And honestly, this is what Kiyosaki means when he says money works for you. Now here's something fascinating. The rich dad didn't tell people to quit their jobs immediately. In fact, he often emphasized learning, building skills, understanding business, understanding investing, understanding money itself. Because before money can work for you, you need to understand how money works. Now let's talk about a psychological trap. Many people become trapped in what Kiyosaki calls the rat race. This happens when a person earns more money, then immediately increases their expenses. Bigger house, bigger car, more payments, more financial obligations. Then they need even more income to support those expenses. And honestly, the cycle repeats. Again and again and again. The person works harder, but doesn't necessarily become freer. Now here's a powerful question. What happens when your salary increases? Many people immediately think, what can I buy? The rich dad encouraged a different question. What asset can I acquire? That shift in thinking changes everything. Because one question increases expenses, the other may increase future income. Now let's imagine two employees who both receive a bonus. The first spends the money on things that lose value over time. The second uses the money to purchase an income-producing asset. 5 years later, their financial situations may look completely different, not because of how much they earned, but because of what they did with what they earned. Now, here's another lesson from the book. The rich dad believed that financial intelligence is often more important than income. Why? Because many people earn large salaries and still struggle financially, while others earn less but manage money effectively. And honestly, history gives us countless examples of both situations. Some people become wealthy through smart financial decisions, others earn fortunes and lose them. Income matters, but financial behavior matters too. Now, let's talk about fear, because fear plays a huge role in money decisions. Many people stay in situations they dislike because they fear uncertainty, fear losing income, fear taking risks, fear making mistakes. And honestly, those fears are understandable. But Kiyosaki argues that fear often prevents people from learning new financial skills. The rich dad encouraged education, not reckless risk-taking, not gambling, education, because knowledge reduces fear. The more you understand business, investing, and money, the more options become available. Now, here's something important. One criticism of the book is that some readers misunderstand this lesson. They assume it means jobs are bad, but that's not really the core message. The deeper message is this: don't depend on a single source of income forever. Learn, grow, build, create options. And honestly, that's advice many financial experts would agree with. Now, before we finish this lesson, I want you to remember something important. The rich dad wasn't obsessed with money itself. He was obsessed with freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to create, the freedom to spend time how you want. And according to the book, assets are the tools that help create that freedom. And in the next lesson, we'll explore one of the book's most debated ideas: why schools teach academic intelligence but rarely teach financial intelligence. Lesson number 4, the financial education most people never receive. Now let's explore one of the most controversial ideas in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And honestly, it is one of the main reasons the book became so famous. Robert Kiyosaki argues that schools teach people how to work for money, but rarely teach people how money actually works. Now, before we continue, it's important to understand something. The book does not say education is useless. In fact, education is extremely important. Reading, writing, mathematics, science, history, languages, all of these subjects matter. The author's argument is different. He believes that financial education is often missing from traditional education. And honestly, Many readers found this idea very relatable. Now think about it. Most students spend years in school. They learn equations, grammar, geography, literature, and countless other subjects. But how many students graduate understanding taxes, investing, cash flow, debt, assets, financial statements, business ownership? For many people, the answer is very little. And honestly, this creates a problem because sooner or later, everyone enters the financial world. Everyone earns money. Everyone spends money. Everyone makes financial decisions. Yet many people do so without formal financial training. Now, here's something fascinating. The rich dad believed that financial intelligence is a skill, just like learning English, just like learning mathematics, just like learning music. It improves through study and practice. But if people never study it, they often learn through mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes become expensive. Now let's talk about one of the most important concepts in the book: financial literacy. This simply means understanding how money moves, how income is created, how expenses work, how investments grow, how businesses operate. And honestly, many people focus entirely on earning money while spending very little time understanding money. The rich dad believed this was a major mistake. Now imagine two people. The first earns a high salary. The second earns a moderate salary. Most people immediately assume the first person will become wealthier, but that's not always true, because wealth is not determined only by income. It is also influenced by decisions, habits, knowledge, and behavior. A person earning less but managing money wisely may outperform someone earning more but spending recklessly. And honestly, this happens more often than many people realize. Now, here's another lesson from the book. The rich dad encouraged continuous learning, not just academic learning, financial learning, business learning, investment learning. Because the world changes constantly, new industries emerge, new opportunities appear, new technologies transform markets. And according to Kiyosaki, people who continue learning gain an advantage. Now let's talk about mistakes. Many schools train students to avoid mistakes. Wrong answers lose points. Errors are penalized. Perfection is rewarded. But business often works differently. Entrepreneurs make mistakes. Investors make mistakes. Business owners make mistakes. The key is learning from them. And honestly, the rich dad believed that fear of mistakes prevents many people from growing financially. Now here's a powerful idea from the book. Your profession and your financial education are not the same thing. Someone can be a doctor, an engineer, a teacher, a lawyer, or a manager, and still know very little about investing or financial management. Professional intelligence and financial intelligence are different skills. And honestly, many readers found this distinction eye-opening. Now let's discuss a criticism. Some financial experts argue that the book oversimplifies certain concepts. And that's a fair point. Real-world finance is often more complex than the examples presented in the book. However, the strength of Rich Dad, Poor Dad was never technical detail. Its strength was changing how people think. It encouraged readers to ask questions they had never asked before. Questions about money, freedom, investing, and long-term financial goals. Now, before we finish this lesson, I want you to remember something important. The biggest lesson is not that schools are bad. The biggest lesson is that learning should never stop. Because financial education, like language learning, is a lifelong process. The more you understand how money works, the better prepared you become to make smart decisions. And in the final lesson, we'll explore the book's biggest legacy, its criticisms, and whether Rich Dad, Poor Dad still deserves its place as one of the most influential financial books ever written. Lesson number 5. Does Rich Dad, Poor Dad still matter today? More than 25 years after its publication, people are still talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Millions of copies have been sold. The book has been translated into dozens of languages, and new readers continue discovering it every year. But here's the important question. Does it still matter today? Or is it simply an old financial book from another era? Honestly, the answer is complicated because some parts of the book remain incredibly influential, while other parts continue to generate debate. Let's start with what made the book powerful. Rich Dad. Poor Dad didn't become famous because it taught advanced investing. It didn't become famous because of complicated financial formulas. It became famous because it changed how people think. For many readers, it was the first book that introduced ideas like financial freedom, assets, cash flow, multiple income streams, and making money work for you. And honestly, those ideas still resonate today. Now think about modern society. Many people still live paycheck to paycheck. Many people still depend on a single source of income. Many people still struggle with debt. Many people still feel financially trapped. Because of that, the book's central message remains relevant. Learn about money, understand money, and take responsibility for your financial future. Now, here's another reason the book remains popular. It is simple, very simple. Some financial books overwhelm readers with technical language, complex terminology, advanced calculations. Rich Dad, Poor Dad does the opposite. It tells stories, uses simple examples, and explains concepts in a way that beginners can understand. And honestly, that simplicity helped millions of people start learning about finance for the first time. Now let's talk about criticism. Because no influential book escapes criticism. Some financial experts argue that certain examples in the book are oversimplified. Others question parts of the author's personal story. And some believe the book presents investing as easier than it really is. These criticisms are important because financial decisions in real life involve risk, research, planning, and careful thinking. There are no guaranteed shortcuts to wealth, and honestly, any responsible discussion of the book should acknowledge that. Now, here's something fascinating. Even many critics of Rich Dad, Poor Dad still admit that the book inspired people to become financially curious, to read more, learn more, and ask better questions. Because sometimes, a book's greatest value is not providing all the answers. It's encouraging people to start searching for answers. Now, let's look at the modern world. Today we have digital businesses, online investing, content creation, artificial intelligence, remote work, and countless new opportunities that didn't exist when the book was first published. Yet the core principles remain surprisingly familiar. Build valuable skills, understand money, create assets, think long-term, continue learning, and honestly, those ideas are probably more relevant than ever. Now, here's the biggest lesson from the entire book. The rich dad and the poor dad are not really two people. They are two mindsets. One mindset asks, how can I earn more money? The other asks, how can I build something that creates value for years? One focuses only on income. The other focuses on ownership. One focuses only on work. The other focuses on systems. And honestly, understanding both perspectives helps people make better decisions. Now, before we finish this episode, I want you to remember something important. You don't need to agree with every idea in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. In fact, you shouldn't blindly agree with any book. The goal is not to copy someone's thinking. The goal is to improve your own thinking. Read, question, analyze, learn, and make informed decisions. Because financial freedom begins with financial education, and financial education begins with curiosity. That may be the book's most valuable lesson of all. Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to Native Flow for more English learning podcasts about famous books, business, psychology, history, personal growth, and success. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep investing in your knowledge. Because knowledge is one asset that nobody can take away from you,